And welcome, everyone. The sports writers are here. We're minus Nick Giannino this week. He's on vacation. Phil Stacey, Matt Williams, Nick Kukuru are all here. I'm Bill Newell from MSO News Sports. And the winter tournaments are over. The spring sports practices have started. We're already in spring now, believe it or not. And so we're moving on, but we're going to look back here at kind of an eventful weekend here with North Shore teams. Just a quick overview: St. John's Prep Hockey winning the Division I state title with a 6-2 win over Zavarian. And on Friday night, at the beginning of the weekend, St. Mary's captured the boys D3 title out of Lynn, 71-40 over Watertown. And then St. Mary's girls also captured a D3 girls basketball title with a 2-point 46-44 win over Rockland. So 3 private schools from the North Shore coming away with state titles this past weekend. Last week we were talking about the Final Four, if you will, in all these different tournaments. Gloucester hockey making it there. We'll talk more about that as well here in the podcast. But Phil, let's begin with St. John's Prep Hockey. You also have a Colin Blackwell related kind of story, if you will, breaking in the last 24 hours or so that he's moving to a new team. So I guess I'll let you take it from here, and you and Matt on the Prep Hockey win on Sunday night.
All right. Well, first, I mean, and I didn't say this to him, and he doesn't know it's coming, but I wanted to thank Willie for his great work this past week in assisting me with the St. John's Prep stuff. You know, we like to, what we term as double up as we get deeper into the tournament. You know, we lose more and more teams, and the teams that are still playing, it becomes more important. So if we can, we try to send 2 people to a game if at all possible. And he came with me to both the semifinal, which was a great game, double overtime win, and Sunday state final. And, you know, it might not mean a lot to someone who's, you know, time isn't really a factor or whatever, but the game started almost an hour and 10 minutes later than it was scheduled to. So we didn't have the first puck drop until almost 9 p.m. last night. Oof. And our deadline for the newspaper is not much after that. So, you know, for him to crank out a great column like he did on the game, get all the facts in there. And you can read on our website the stories with quotes. We just had to make the paper version, you know, had to be quoteless, but he really did a great job. So I want to say thank you, sir, for that. As for the game itself, I mean, am I surprised they won the title? No, not at all. I said back in early January, I told another coach, I said, St. John's Prep will win the state championship this season. You really think so? I'm like, I know so. I know so. And there were certainly bumps along the way that you think, you know, well, maybe that's not going to happen and whatever. But I think the way that they played last night, Bill, was the way they were capable of playing all season. They put it all together with a remarkable performance, 5 unanswered goals to win 6-2. Tommy Sonny, talk about the time to have the game of your life. 4 goals, 2 assists in the state finals against the second best team in the state. I mean, geez, crazy. They have a ton of depth. They're very highly skilled. They're a great skating team. It's solid goaltending with Peyton Palladino from Danvers. They had a really good defense. I thought the defense was excellent in the postseason. What do we say, Willie? They only gave up how many? 5 goals in 5 playoff games, I want to say. 2 to Braintree, 2 to Zavarian, 1 to King Philip, and 1 to BC High. So 6 in 5 plus.
Matt, we're not hearing you for some reason. I don't know whether it's you're not muted at our end. And then Phil just froze.
How's that?
The overtime against BC.
Okay.
He really stepped up and had a wonderful playoff. Can you hear me all right?
Now we hear you, Phil, but you did freeze for a moment. We didn't hear Matt. Now we hear Matt. And I think we hear Nick Kukuru. I'm not quite sure, but
I was just saying, I thought that, you know, Aiden Holland had a wonderful playoff run, kind of leading that defense. And that's with, you know, captain back there and Theo Viteri, a lot of seniors with Jeff Melanson and Mike Sheehan and Zach Raposo. And, you know, the forward depth, it's hard to really contemplate. I mean, their first line would be their third line would be a first line at most schools. So that should tell you, you know, the kind of depth that they have there. No real one stud. I mean, Sani was obviously the star Sunday night, but they really don't have that one player where you'd say like, oh, we got a game plan for so-and-so, because there's so many different guys that can beat you. They're so spread out in what they can do. And I think that was a huge key in their overall success.
Matt, you were going to weigh in on something. I'm sorry. I think.
I think I just mentioned I don't think the Prep gave up 3 goals in any game in the tournament. And I mean, it's been a while, even in the regular season. I think maybe the one CM game and was the only game they really gave up 3 goals. I mean, they were pretty stingy all year long.
They beat St. John's of Shrewsbury 7-5 after having a 7-2 lead, and they gave up 3 late goals with a backup goalie in. But yes, I understand your point.
Yeah, I mean, they really didn't give up much in the way of goals all season long. So, good for them. And, they were a great squad. I mean, I think certainly one of those teams that's more than the sum of its parts and plays the game the right way and kind of the more than just skill, which is how their coaching staff tried to build it. And, that's pretty cool. I mean, two times state champs now, and 1 Super 8, 1 Division 1. Obviously there is no Super 8, so twice at the top of the mountain. I mean, there's not many programs since these coaches took over that can say that. These guys have really become the standard. And I think we talked about it yesterday a little bit off air, and when these guys took over the prep was chasing. They were not in that sort of top tier with at the time Catholic Memorial and Malden Catholic and some of the other programs. And now I think all those programs are chasing the prep. So, I mean, 15 years is a lifetime in high school sports, but just in those 15 years, they've completely transformed the reputation of the program, and they deserve all the roses that are coming their way today. They work really, really hard at it. And, they've done an incredible job. I mean, you have to tip your cap to those guys.
When I spoke with Christian Hansen this morning, the head coach, he said he had already received over 200 text messages in a,
All right, we lost Phil again.
Less than 12-hour span. They're getting all this congratulations from all over. And I'm going to try to log back in. I'll log off and log back in.
You're back in now, though, Phil. You're back now. It's up to you. Let's give it one more shot here. We don't want to lose. We don't want to lose you, Phil. You're welcome to do whatever. Why don't you log back in? Because that'll give me a chance. I wanted to talk about Gloucester hockey for a second here, sure. And then we'll circle back to the prep. So why don't you log back in, and then we'll give it one more shot here. Nick, we want to talk about the Fishermen and the great run they had this year. You talk about a special season. We were talking about them heading into last week's podcast into the Final Four. They lost in that semifinal game to Canton 6-3, but maybe share some insights on either that game or on that, or in particular the season this year for the Fishermen.
Yeah, I mean, last week I thought they kind of ran into a more complete team. I mean, Canton had the defense to go with the offense, and they were the first team that I'd seen all year that could, both slow Gloucester down and kind of go up and down the ice with them. There were a lot of teams that could do one or the other, but Canton did both. And I mean, 6-3 wasn't even that competitive. Canton just kind of came out and dominated. 4 goals on 5 shots in the first 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I mean, that was kind of it right there with the way that, Canton takes care of the puck and just their whole overall system as a team. You knew, as Derek Geary said, the 4th goal there, going down 4-0 was the killer. 3-0, he still would have been, confident in what his guys can do, but 4-0 against a team like that is insurmountable, and it ended up being that way. But yeah, I mean, honestly, this was probably, I've been covering the team for 15 years now, and this was probably easily the most exciting, satisfying season that I've covered out of them. Easily. I mean, they were just so fun to watch every night. Sometimes they made you want to pull your hair out when they go up by 3 goals and, the other team would tie the game up, but then they'd go and make a spectacular play and win it after. So, they were dynamic, to say the least. And, they ran into a more complete team in the end in Canton. That's all that was about.
Yeah. We can go back to the prep, but just a quick summary on the statewide tournament here with the power rankings, power seeding, so to speak. Did this work out pretty well for the most part? Do people think? Matt?
I think
Like
yes.
it. I mean, go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, I think we saw some glitches in it. I mean, I don't want to, think it's, too big of a deal, but I thought Manchester Essex boys hoop they got the 12th seed in Division 4. And I mean, you can say, oh, the home team wins, but I thought, their regional, their state quarterfinal game against Wacona, I thought the difference in that game was home court advantage. It wasn't, who was better on and off on the court. So, I mean, I'm not sure they had that Division 4 boys hoop to a T like they did in some other sports as far as the rankings were concerned. I think Manchester Essex kind of proved that. And I think they probably would have been one of the top 4 or 5 teams in that division if they had gotten that 4th or 5th seed. If some of those Western Mass teams were coming into Manchester, they could have extended another round, I think.
I bet those lower divisions divisions 4 or 5, so on, harder to calculate. I'm just guessing that. I don't know. I don't know that, but there's always been mismatches in those divisions. I mean, but
I do feel as though home court or home ice, depending on your sport, it is a huge advantage at this level. I mean, I think we've seen it throughout the winter, and what Nick made mention of right there was a key point. I think I look at another game where Danvers boys hockey was on the road to face Marlborough, which was the number 1 seed. Danvers had a 3-1 lead in that game going into the 3rd period. If that were being played at Endicott, in Middleton, it could have been a different outcome. Maybe not. But I do think teams having a home advantage, it played into much more of a factor than maybe you would have previously thought.
Yeah, I don't want to sound disingenuous complaining about either because it obviously helped Gloucester hockey immensely. Yeah. I think Norwood would love to play Gloucester on a neutral site, although I don't want to really take up their cause because they have just been incessantly crying the last 2 weeks about what went down in the quarterfinal round at Talbot Rink. I mean, over a week later, I'm still getting emails and snide social media responses from a game 2 rounds ago, but so I don't really want to take up their cause. But if Gloucester and Norwood played on a neutral site, that could have been a different story too.
Yeah,
I think it's imperfect. I do think they need to mess with the formula, and I think that it's we saw some different things that weren't quite right, and it didn't affect too much in terms of the teams that got there at the end, right? The teams that got to the state final, but I think there were still some matchups earlier in the tournament than there should have been. And I think they need to tweak the formula. I mean, just talking to some of my basketball people, the margin of victory is way too low. It's really not fair. I don't think it's messing with coaches' substitution patterns. And, I think it's 10 points right now is the max. And I mean, that's no good. Because Salem won the majority probably of their conference games by 10 points. Beverly won the majority of their conference games probably by 20 to 25 points. Those should not be worth the same thing. There should be a higher cap, I think. And there's a place where you can set the cap where you're not running up the score, but it's still, 10 points really isn't that much of a win. You could be up by 7 points. That's only 2 possessions at the end of the game. You're still fouling. Every 10-point game is not a blowout, right? And I think people in hockey didn't make that big a deal of it. But the fact that theoretically you shouldn't pull your goalie so you don't lose by 2, so you're not actually trying to tie or win the game is insanity. That's insanity. So that's got to go, in my opinion.
But
you're incentivizing coaches not to try to win. That's madness.
Yeah, I've seen a game like that where a team in the lower division cut the lead to 9 and then didn't kind of let the clock run out on the last 35 seconds so they could keep that 9-point deficit instead of playing until the end because they were playing a higher division team. It was strange, and in the end, I don't think it really helped them because the team that they ended up losing to didn't have a great record to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, everybody trying to strategize this power formula in that way that's unnatural to actually winning the game, like they're a baseball nerd executive or something. I have no use for it. I think it's crazy town.
Well, we keep hearing that, wins do count. You hear from people that are making these decisions like, nope, the wins still matter. The wins still matter. They do, but as these guys have pointed out, Bill, I think there are outliers where, like, well, if we're going to lose, I'd rather lose 5-3 than 6-3. And that's very real. And that's, I tend to agree where pull a goalie, try to score. The objective is still to try to win, not try to lose by X amount of goals. So I do think the TMC is going to have to try to figure out a way to tweak things a little bit. I think by and large, they've got the formula down pretty good, but there are some tweaks that are going to need to be made to, in an effort to make it even better, to perfect it if that's possible.
I wonder about baseball too, because you're talking about pitch counts. So are you trying, do you bring in your JV pitcher to save your pitch count in a game that's maybe out of hand? But then, or even if you have a lead, but then you risk blowing up the margin. So the coach has to weigh those two things. That sort of seems antithetical. And I don't even know how it works on a per inning basis, because with federation rules, you have the slaughter rule in baseball, right? So if you lose by 10 in 7 innings, do you actually get more points than losing by 10 in 5? I don't know. That sort of is something that has to be solved too. So I think there's a lot of wrinkles, and I suppose it's the same in softball, right? There's a mercy rule in softball too. No pitch count to worry about as much, but that's sort of an interesting wrinkle that I haven't heard too much about as we turn the page here to the spring season.
I'll tell you what there isn't in the spring, which thank God for this. There are no ties.
Yeah.
No ties to figure into the formula of anything. So
unless you have a super tiebreaker in tennis, right? On account of darkness or something like this.
Okay.
Those super pro sets or whatever that they play.
Yeah.
Not that we can't move on, and I should just let this go, but it seems to me when you're have a formula based on scores, margin of victory, that to me is not right, to me, because it messes with sportsmanship. In other words, I should be happy to take my basketball team. Let's say I was this year's Beverly team, and I don't know their scores of their game. But they should win by a lot over a lot of their opponents. I have no problem with that. They were a very talented team. Maybe I should use the Lynn English team from 2 years ago or whatever. So there's a team that rolled up huge wins. Games were not even close. But to me, if you win by 5 or if you win by 45, I'm not sure how much extra credit you should get for the bigger win. You know what I'm saying? Or the margin of loss. Maybe it impacts the conference. I like when you play non-league or you play other opponents or whatever, but I don't know what you can do about it. I'm not sure.
You certainly can't take it on a case-by-case basis. As much as you might want to. Look at what happened over the weekend when Malden Catholic basketball beat, what was it, Norwood that they beat in the final? The Norwood boys?
Yes.
Yeah, by 55 points. And Willie, you said that they were still shooting 3-pointers like in the late going or whatever. No, I don't know.
That is what I read on Twitter.
Then it must be true if it's on Twitter.
Well, it was by a good friend Matt Feld, so I do trust him, but you never know.
Yes, I am Team Feld, so I am with you there.
He could be co-opted, but
yeah. So is that sportsmanlike, or is that saying?
No, I would say no. It isn't. No, it isn't. It's not sportsmanlike.
But the flip side of that is, well, this is the style of offense we play, and these are my 10th, 11th, and 12th guys on the roster. Shouldn't they be able to have their name in a box score that they scored in a state championship game? There's 2 ways to play that. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong.
But that doesn't bother me so much. If you have your second string in, or third string, whatever, basketball, third string, you have your third string in, okay, fine. But, maybe you take the foot off the gas a little bit, but it's still like, if you're up 50 points, taking threes, maybe you really want to rethink that. I think you can say, no, don't take a three. You can say that,
I sort of agree with Bill in the sense that, like, obviously the cap, if it was 30 or 40 in basketball, would be way too high, right? But I do think there's a way to make it a little bit lower. You know, I just used the Beverly and Salem example. I mean, we all know that the Beverly boys basketball team was much more dominant than Salem this year, right? So is there a way to cap it at, I don't know, 15, 18 and a half, 20, something like that, so that it does show that difference in dominance, but does not rub it in? And I know that's a, you know, that's a really fine line to draw, right? And there's always going to be people that are unhappy with it. But I think, you know, the more experience we get with this, we can continue to tweak and find that line to where it sort of serves all parties.
Well, that was the point that you and I were talking about yesterday, where, you know, in football now, it used to be if you were blowing somebody out, you didn't dare pass the ball. You just ran. You tried to run the clock out or whatever. And a lot of teams still do that now, especially with the running time under Federation rules. But if you have a passing offense and your backup quarterback and your backup linemen are in there and your backup receivers, and you want to see how those guys might do under varsity conditions, we're going to see teams that pass the ball, and it's not as taboo as it once was. So the rules do evolve. I mean, I think everyone has a basic idea of what's a blowout win and what is poor sportsmanship. Poor sportsmanship is throwing a touchdown pass on the final play of a game when you're ahead by 50 points. That's poor sportsmanship. Getting blown out in a state final, again, depending on how you do it, doesn't have to be poor sportsmanship. I wasn't at Malden Catholic at that game. I have no idea what happened or what didn't. But we've had plenty of games. I mean, Willie, when was it? Maybe 15 years ago, Swampscott girls with Caitlin Leonard, you know, get all the way to the final and they win by 35, 40 points against some overmatched team from Western Mass. Is that poor sportsmanship, or do they really just blow them out of the water and that's how it was?
No, and I think it's the same in football too. I think the cap was 14. I mean, we've all seen 14-point games that were not blowouts, right? So I mean, that's 14. You're not really given full credit for an actual blowout win at 14. And I know they are reticent to jack up that thing because people are going to say, you know, I'm sure the Mike Lynches of the world will be saying the MIAA is poor sports. They're encouraging blowouts, you know, but I just think, you know, to give a team the same credit for you know, a 14-point win as opposed to some of these actual blowouts that we've seen is, you know, there's got to be a way to do it so you take care of everybody. I don't know. It's, you know when you see it as far as poor sportsmanship. I think Phil's totally right on that one.
Yeah. Nick, how many games did the Gloucester boys hockey team win by 5 or more goals this year? I think he's frozen.
I think Nick froze.
Yeah, either that he's in a Zen-like state.
Well, let me just go back to, you know, I want to clarify. I think let me just go back to, you know, back to my Lynn English reference boys basketball from a couple of years ago. I mean, there was a team that was head and shoulders above their league opponents, with exception of maybe one at the time, way ahead of everyone else. So if they were winning by 30 or 40 points, I wouldn't have called that bad sportsmanship necessarily. You know what I'm saying? I agree. There's certain things you just can't do when you're totally at a mismatch. If the four of us that get together and play 4-on-4 against some, you know, some kindergartners, probably could run up a pretty, you know, we'd be hard to give, you know, to lose that game. I'm hoping anyways, but and we'd have a pretty big margin of win, but of victory, but and whatever. Phil, you had a question for Nick, and I think Nick froze. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
And then I noticed nobody else was moving. So I'm like, oh, it must have been on my end.
I was asking, how many games did Gloucester hockey win this season by 5 goals? Do you know?
Not as many as you'd think, because they allow a lot of goals.
Okay. I only picked that 5 number because I know they scored like 130 goals, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but they did give up their share of them. All right, so they didn't have a ton of flaw.
They were probably 4 or 5, I'd say. Yeah.
All right,
we have to, you know, I mean, Willie said 14-point football games aren't blowouts. I mean, I've seen 21-point football games and aren't blowouts. Didn't you know? Marblehead lose to Tewksbury one year deep in the playoffs, so they were like driving to tie the game, and Tewksbury got back-to-back pick sixes. It was like a 35-14 game, but you know, Marblehead was about 15 yards away from tying it.
Right. Right. Yeah. Not all. And I think, that's a great example with Phil with the Gloucester hockey and, another good example is the old Gloucester football. I mean, they used to beat teams routinely by 20 to 30 points and nobody ever accused Coach Ingram of running up the score. He was always a gentleman. So,
Unless you were in Barnstable.
Yeah,
well, the one time that's
That
true.
one I always remember.
that was
through no,
reverse.
through no fault of Coach Ingram's at all. Through no fault of Coach.
Yeah,
that one they
so-
had coming to him.
But
Yeah,
in
he
football,
was-
one of those things.
Didn't stop blitzing. So it was kind of like reverse running up the score. He got that freshman quarterback to throw about 6 interceptions. They did not call off the dogs with the blitzes.
Right.
I know a topic that we wanted to discuss, and we have a few minutes left, but let's make sure we grab a few minutes to do this. Is the private schools in the state tournament and the element of dominance or whatever. So, Phil, maybe share with us some thoughts what you're hearing around about public, private, state tournaments. Because as we started off, we mentioned St. Mary's wins 2 basketball titles over the weekend. The Prep wins a hockey title. Prep won some other titles this winter.
You're always going to get heated discussion, I feel like, on both sides. On the one hand, if you're pro public school, you think the system's rigged and the parochial schools recruit and it's not an even playing field. And if you're on the parochial side of things, you're like, hey, you know what? I mean, it is what it is. And we're part of the MIA just like you are. And we have to win the same amount of games you would to win a title. So, all it's fair in love and war kind of thing. There's no easy answer. Certainly, do schools that have athletes from different communities and by and large very good to the very best athletes have an advantage? Of course they do. I mean, but regional schools don't have that same kind of a Hamilton Wenham, a Manchester Essex, a Triton, a Pentucket. They're not going to have an advantage over, say, a Newburyport or an Amesbury that's a single school type, situation. I don't know. I mean, when I hear things like recruiting and, the MIA has to self-police. And, if you sense that someone is recruiting, I mean, let's put our cards on the table here. For years and years, we've all heard like Everett football used to recruit. Everett football, Now that same coach from Everett is a Catholic Memorial recruits, and now they're a powerhouse, and they're going to beat, everybody for the next 10 years easily, and da-da-da-da-da. I can't speak to that. They're certainly never going to blow the whistle on themselves. But as it pertains to like a St. Mary's and especially I think a St. John's Prep, I mean, at St. John's Prep, I don't think they recruit so much as that the school itself and the programs recruit on their own.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're a swimmer and you want to compete at the highest level, might you want to go to a school that's won 14 of the last 15 state championships? If you play baseball or lacrosse or you wrestle, don't you want to be part of a team that is continually among the best in the state? Have you ever been to that campus? That campus sells itself. And to me, and hey, and I say this, I was a public school guy. My kids go to public school. I don't have a dog in the fight either way. My thought is you send your kids what's best for you, But it's not as if St. John's or St. Mary's or Bishop Fenwick or whatever. It's not like this is Augusta National where you can't get in. You can. You can make the choice to go there if you want to.
Well,
so
they don't let everybody. I mean, they do have exams and
Yes, of course. You're right. It's not like, hey, here's my check for X amount. I want my kid going. You're right. Yes. But there's the opportunity for almost anyone to go there, should they so choose. And I think when kids stay at their public schools, it's fantastic. I love it when a team like, and I mentioned them earlier, Danvers hockey had this great unexpected run this year. And Coach Kevin Passett said, I really hope this shows what kids from Danvers can do when they stay together. And I hope for the future we get a ton of Danvers kids that stay in town and want to play hockey here. I think that's fantastic. That's great. There's nothing like the support of your hometown when you play for your hometown team and all. But for not every family wants to be in that situation. For some, they want to look elsewhere. And that's where these other schools come into play.
I think it's just, I mean, it's the divisions, right? I mean, I don't think too many people have problems with the Catholic Conference the ones that are in Division One, Zavarian, BC High, St. John's Prep. When you start looking at some of these schools that are in Divisions 3 and 2, and they say, well, we don't have enough enrollment, and it's like, well, you have a million other advantages. So get in Division 1 where you belong, and that's that. And I think if the MIA would just enforce their own transfer rules, it would solve a lot of these problems, and they choose not to because they're afraid they're going to be sued, and shame on the courts for not upholding those rules. The rules are the rules for a reason.
Hold on a
And,
second. Are you saying that all the parochial schools should be Division 1 for any kind of playoff scenario?
I think it's the same as the blowouts. We all know who belongs up there and who doesn't, right? I mean, we're not talking about St. Joseph Prep, but
Right.
the idea that Malden Catholic boys basketball is in Division 2 is a joke. I don't care how bad they were in 1996, in 2022. Everybody's been saying, well, they haven't won in so long, but it's very convenient that there was no tournament last year because they would have blown everybody away and they would have been moved up. So, that's happenstance. I'm sure they would trade, COVID canceling the tournament. They'd rather have won last year and been moved up. I'm sure if it was up to them, it wasn't up to them, and whatever. But I just, when you're talking about Catholic Conference programs, for years, St. Mary's was in Division 4. I think everybody knew that was a farce. At least they're in 3 now. And that's even probably too low for them. And I don't care how many boys they have. That's not relevant to me. The advantages they have, the way they build their program, they don't belong playing against Hamilton Wenham. And a lot of people might disagree. They want to go by stole enrollment as if that really matters. And I just, you look at it and you can tell that it's not true. And my evidence would be if there was a Super 8, they would want to be in it, right? So you want to compete when it's prestigious, but when it's not prestigious, you want to stay in Division 3. That just doesn't really add up.
So what do we do in a case where enrollment wise, like Peabody High might be a Division 1 school, but I've seen the last 2 postseasons, Peabody High lacrosse play St. John's Prep lacrosse, and it was, and this is no disrespect whatsoever to Peabody, it's just the way the teams are constructed. They on their absolute best day, they are not going to beat St. John's Prep in the state tournament in this day and age right now. How do we fix that? Should we further align the divisions so that, well, yeah, they might have, 800 boys, but those 800 boys are not commensurate to the X amount of boys from Lincoln Sudbury and St. John's Prep and, whatever, in this particular sport kind of thing.
No, I think Peabody belongs in Division 1. I don't think that's, maybe if there was a Super 8 and the Prep was out of that tournament, but it's very similar in boys basketball. Peabody belongs in Division 1, and they're going to have a really hard time beating Lawrence, beating Andover. Take the privates out of it. The public schools in the MVC, they're going to have a really hard time beating, right, in basketball because it's just not their forte. But maybe they'll beat those schools in baseball. I do think that the big schools should be with the big schools, whether or not they stink at a given sport. And that goes for the GBL. I don't really think Revere belongs in Division 3 just because they're not so hot. Like I do think that, you got to get better. And I think, take the privates out of it. If Peabody lacrosse played Lincoln Sudbury, it would be the same thing, right? That's just what they're good at. And you know what? If it was girls soccer, there's a lot of schools Peabody size that can't play with them in that sport. Right. So that's just kind of how it goes, right? Minnesota's really good at hockey, and they're not so good at probably baseball or something like that. I do think that I don't like the idea of taking your really big schools and moving them down against little schools, just for competitive reasons. I don't think that's but
it does happen like with a Lowell. Lowell doesn't Lowell is huge, and they don't play Division 1 football. They don't play Division 1 hockey.
I believe they do play football. I think hockey has always been different, and I'm not sure that that's good either, and they've changed that recently. Peabody was always Division 2 for hockey, even though they were Division 1 for everything else, and that they didn't even win in D2 and all that. And I'm not sure, the state wants to get away from that, and I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, I guess.
Right, because if they had a team this year, they would have been a Division I team.
Sure, right. No, precisely. I don't know, because you would get a lot of complaints. We've heard them in the past. Swampscott is notorious for that, right? I mean, we're playing teams that have 4 times as many kids as us, Winthrop too. So I do think the big public should remain in their high divisions as well. This isn't just a move up the private schools thing for me, trying to be consistent, I guess.
Hey, I'm looking at the clock and time is running out. Nick Kukuru, do you want to weigh in on this at all? I want to make sure you get a chance here.
Not really. I don't cover any private schools, so I really don't have any dog in this fight. If we're being totally honest, I thought it was a little, as an outside spectator with no dog in the fight, I just thought it was, it's kind of disheartening when it's kind of a foregone conclusion before the tournament starts that, St. Mary's boys or Catholic Memorial football is just going to go all the way. I think it kind of ruins the bracket, if we're being honest, but I don't have any good ideas how to alleviate that. So.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I know in the city that I grew up with in another state, we had one public high school that I went to and one private high school right down the street, actually in another town, but it was basically the same city. And we had great rivalries. That was the 2 rivalries. It wasn't a Beverly Salem rivalry. It was like a Beverly versus St. John's Prep rivalry, albeit that they weren't the category of St. John's Prep. They were a boys, girls private school, but it was a great rivalry. And it would have been a great rivalry, whether it was another town or not, 2 comparable schools at the time when I was younger. But anyways, I mean, it was great to have the private schools in the tournament because it brought everybody together. I mean, I think there's a couple of sides here, but maybe it's the placement of where they all go. So now we are down to our final minute. I ate up some time there. I apologize. But gentlemen, Phil, I'm going to give you the last 30 seconds or so, or 45 seconds. Anything else you want to share?
All right. Well, it's been, hey, Coop. That's my guy, my middle guy. Can you say hi? Hi. We are on to spring now. It's been a great winter season. A lot of terrific teams. Had a lot of fun getting out to different games this year and all. So I want to thank the coaches and student athletes that took part in the winter season. I'm looking forward to getting back outside, doing some lacrosse and maybe catching a baseball, softball game or two and the nicer weather.
You got it. Well, on that note, we'll stop. But gentlemen, great stuff. A great winter. And again, congratulations to all the teams, coaches for all their work. And congratulations to the title winners that we discussed throughout the program here today. And we'll talk again soon. So gentlemen, have a great week ahead and welcome to spring.
Thanks, Bill.